talk about how to start writing your personal statement and what to do after your first draft. I know this is an LSAT group, but we all have to write a personal statement, so thought I would talk about that a little bit here. I do have a presentation to share with you. There's not a lot of content on it. It's a lot more visual, so I'll send it to Steve after to kind of send out, but here we go. Let me share my screen. Let's see. There we go. There we go. Do we all see that? Good. Okay, let me pull the chat over back here. And let me just pull this over here. All right. So clearly, this is what I'm going to be talking about today. And first, before we even start talking about the personal statement, I want to hammer this home. Let's get used to writing. Those of us who have been out of school for a while might not have done introspective writing in a while. Those of us who are in school might not do introspective writing a lot. We're used to doing research papers and like theses and all that. So I think personal statements are a little bit of a unique writing tool. So I do think we want to get used to writing introspectively. And why we want to do this is we want to find our voice, our tone, and our style. And I read a lot of personal statements, not for law school, but for other, for students who are going into undergraduate, for their undergraduate degree. And what's really apparent is people who are not used to writing write their first draft and they haven't developed a voice, tone, and style, even sort of a semi-developed one. And then as they're writing, draft 10, draft 11, draft 12, they've developed a voice. They have this great tone and style about their writing, but they're also going off of their first draft. Like there's some stuff that's still left from the first draft. And it's weird, but it stands out in a weird way where the tone doesn't match the rest of the essay that they've edited. So I'm not saying that you need to have all of this figured out before you start writing. It's, I think, having a little bit of a semi-developed style, voice, tone, know your style a little bit before we go into writing that personal statement. And it will help you in the long run when you're doing those final edits. And it's like, does that really sound right? And does it really mesh well? Does the sentence fit in the essay that you're trying to write? And it'll help you with that. So that's where I start. And I think people are busy. We don't have a lot of time to do a lot of things. So I say, give yourself a prompt, maybe once a week, even once a month, to do an introspective writing. People who write diaries are really great at this. So if you keep a diary, props for you. But give yourself a prompt to reflect on the week, reflect on the month, I don't know, and do some introspective writing before you start your personal statement. All right, choosing a topic. I think some of these might be familiar. There's a lot going on here, but a lot of times, I know Elena talked about, looking for the prompt. I do find that the law school prompt is very, very broad. Many times they say you don't really have to talk about why law school. It could be anything you want. Some schools do give a little bit more prompt and direction, but these are a lot of the things that we see as topics in your personal statement. So like why law school is a big one. You want to talk about your legal experience, a moment when you realized you wanted to go to law school, all of that great stuff. And when I think about this, a lot of times we go into writing a personal statement with like a story in mind. We're like, ooh, I really want to, or like we all want to have an interesting hook. So we have this like moment that we're all talking about at the top of the essay that's very unique to you. And I think that lends itself for an essay to look like this, right? The center is the story that you want to tell about yourself. And then you have these branches of you need to talk about why law school, what you'll bring to the law school, why you might be a good fit, what are the qualities that you bring, all these things that you want to talk about. And it's centered around the story that you want to tell. Not to bury the hatchet here, I don't think this is a great organization for a personal statement. So don't write this down. We'll move on from this. I think it's a lot of stuff to put into a two-page essay. In general, we're seeing a two-page essay here, double-spaced. So I think this is a lot to cover in this format. And I think there's a better way to organize that essay. So I compel you to ask yourself a little bit of a different question when you're thinking about topic. I think a better question is, what do you want the law school admission to know about you? And the answer to that, usually, most of the time, is like qualities like I'm a good listener, I can think on my feet, I'm compassionate, I'm an advocate, I've been in this field a lot. Those are the qualities that come up. And that story that you usually think about when you're first starting to think about your personal statement goes into the background a little bit. It kind of is it's not as important in writing that essay anymore when you start with this question. So I think it's good to think about this a little bit and then start thinking about your essay. Here we go. One sort of caveat here, I think that I see, and not too often when I read peer essays here, but many times in personal statements, a lot of their purpose comes down to like, I want to help others, or stuff like that. I do think reasons to do anything really comes down to helping others, or it's self-motivated. So I personally don't find I want to do this because I want to help others, that general topic, to be interesting. I do think that you want to add more color, more texture to that. So just a caveat note here, I won't be talking about a topic that's helping others. So I don't know if everyone knows the Golden Circle, by first presented by Simon Sinek years ago in a TED Talk. But this really kind of helped me sift through what I wanted to say in my personal statement. That story that I talked about, we all think about, I really want to showcase this moment in time when I decided to go to law school, or this really traumatic time in my life that I motivates me to go to law school, or something like that, right? Like, we all want to tell that story. That usually is the what here. And it's not getting to the core of who we are, what we want to talk about. And I really think that our personal statement should really talk about the why, right? Why, and this is not I'm not advocating to say we should write an essay about why law school. It's more what we believe. What is your purpose? What is your cause, right, in life? And and I think a great way to bring the law school piece in would be, how does law school fit into your purpose? So I think the why question is much more important than the what. And I'll go into the how, but so a little bit of a different way to look at this circle, because it's a little hard to kind of graph things around a circle, is a tier. So I put the big why at the top. The how is our differentiators, right? The things that I talked about, the compassion, the things that you want the law school to know about you. Those are your differentiators. And then the what. That's like the story that we want to tell. So in this tier, the big why, why you're going, not why you're going to law school, but why law school is right for you, your purpose for going to law school, your cause, what makes you tick is absolutely necessary in your essay. I think it is central. It tells us who you are. And it's not like you made it up, right? You can't make your purpose up. So that's absolutely necessary. The second necessary thing here are the good qualities you want to highlight about yourself. This is exactly what I was talking about, your differentiators, right? The things that you want the law school to know about you, and what makes you different from other candidates. And then the what? This is the story that we use to support all of this, the why and the how. This is maybe your job, your internship, your school, like the tangible what's. Any questions at that point? I know I talk a lot, so you all good? Alrighty. So I think when you think about your personal statement, you really want to start with the why, and then go to your differentiators, and then pick a story, right? Usually we're going backwards because it's easier to think about a moment that you've experienced because you've experienced it. So it's easy to go, oh yeah, I want to talk about this moment. And then you start thinking about okay, how do I fit in what I'm bringing to the school? How do I fit in my purpose? And it sometimes doesn't gel right. I do find that going top to bottom is a easier process. It takes longer to kind of come up with the right why, but it's an easier process top down. Okay, and then going off of the process, I want to talk about the scope of the topic. I think there are general, specific, and niche topics here. So for general, I think these are, the big events that a lot of people have experienced. So, I know Steve has talked about this, but like people talking about COVID, people talking about Black Lives Matter, back a decade, 9/11, things that the majority of law school applicants are going to experience, like going to college, like we all had to go to college to apply to law school. So, stuff like that. Those are big general events. And they aren't inherently unique to you. Specific, this is where we find a majority of our essay topics. These are big events in your own life. They might not be overtly unique. Like I like to say, some people like to talk about a loss in their life, like a loss of a family member. And yes, that's impactful in your life, but I bet you we can find other people who have lost someone in their family. So it's unique to you, but also not an overtly unique example. So, examples here, legal troubles, issues that you've had in your family, working in a law-related field, working experience, life-changing event, all that. And then you have these really, really niche topics. And these are experiences that you had in a very, very specific situation. And usually you're in a niche topic when you have to explain a lot of your essay or your topic. I actually fall into the niche category. I worked in cybersecurity, so I have to explain a lot of things in cyber, and there's a lot of jargon that people just don't understand. And my essay, my first draft was like 4 pages long. So when you're in a niche, when you just have to explain stuff that you didn't do, but you need to explain it to understand what you were doing. Alrighty. So a little bit of pros and cons here. So the general topics, those big events that we all know about, those topics are general enough that you don't need a lot of background information. for your reader to understand what you're talking about. We all experience COVID. We all experience, Black Lives Matter in different communities here. We, as a country, saw 9/11. So, we've all experienced it. So it's not hard for the reader to imagine what is going on. The con to this is it's really hard to make it unique. And it's hard to make it your own. So if you want to go with a topic like this, I do suggest bringing yourself forward, where you were, what you were thinking, what changes happened due to that event, and what was your action after that. You want to make sure that there's follow through in that, and that the essay isn't a reactionary conversation. But you really have to bring out a lot of yourself when you want to talk about a very general event. For a specific topic, most situations are not too difficult for a reader to understand. There's nuances like, I started a job at X, Y, and Z. So it might be like a very specific firm, but it's not hard to kind of imagine that situation. And yet the topic is unique to you. So it's a good balance there. The cons here is that you can fall into the trap of the story that you want to tell versus the story you need to tell. This is a trap that we get too attached to that story that we're like, the first time I walked into the doors of firm X, Y, and Z, like there were lawyers everywhere and it was so inspiring. And we're so attached to that idea that we kind of forget why that story is there. We really have to be willing to be flexible with that story and change what we're highlighting in that story to make it work for your unique perspective. Also, you can fall into the origin story trap where it's like, as a child, I had to go to court for X, Y, and Z, and therefore I'm very interested in the legal profession. That doesn't really show development, and you want to make sure that your essay is showing that as an adult you understand the nuances of the legal profession, and even given that you are still committed to pursuing that. So there's a couple traps in the specific category. I can go into more detail there, but I would be aware of those. And then the niche topic, it's a very specific point of view, and it fits well for people who've worked in a specific, who have significant work experience. If they've been in a firm for, X number of years, or if they're the only person in an organization that does a certain type of job, or, something like that, that will be a specific, unique view that is interesting and can speak to a lot. The cons to that, like I said before, you might have to explain a lot of jargon. You might have to explain the nuances that's going on. So your essay needs to be really, really tight, and you can't explain like a whole series of events, because then you're writing 10 pages. So we really want to keep that tight. So just a couple tips. I know I've said a couple of these before, but for the general topic, you want to keep it personal. What was your reaction? The event isn't unique, so you want to keep your part unique, right? The people around you, how you reacted, how the other people reacted, how did you feel about that, X, Y, and Z. So, and the general topic can be really elevated with writing style and tone. So if you're in that category, I do suggest kind of revving and developing a style, a voice, a tone before you go into it. You will see benefits from that. I see a question from Ariel. Is it worth writing about a niche community one is in if it has nothing to do with why they want to go to law school? When I say niche, I think more on the professional side. Like you see a lot of people say they're in a niche community because they're like bilingual, trilingual, and they're, that's not really, I don't consider that to be niche. It's more like maybe you were an engineer working in Lockheed Martin, and so you have a lot of engineering terminology in there, and you have to remember that first part of our conversation that we had, where it's like it should serve the why, and the topic needs to match the why. So I think that if you want to talk about why you want to go to law school, and your niche community doesn't serve that purpose, then I don't think that's a right fit for you, Ariel. Just hope that answers your question. Okay, and then going back to this presentation here, for the specific, we really want to gauge how personal you want to get in your essay. And I do want to point out here sometimes, and I don't see it too much with the law school essays, but sometimes you see people who are like, I must tell this story for people to know who I am. And that can include trauma, very traumatic experiences. And I do think that this personal statement is not a place for that, not to diminish the trauma that happened, but more that this is a essay with purpose. And you don't want to muddle that purpose here. So I would be very careful about personal. You want to keep it personal with intent. And then don't get too caught up in telling your story here in the specifics. And then for the niche, you really want to narrowly tailor the story to the purpose, and then stay away from explaining the complex, like, oh, we're not thinking about X, Y, and Z, and there's policy over here, and there's this company over here. Like, we don't want to be in the middle of that. We want your experience. So keep it tight. And then especially for the niche, you want someone to, and this is a little bit ways down past your first draft, but you want someone to be reading your essay just to make sure that it makes sense to someone who's not in your field, because we forget that people don't know all the things that you know, because we're all experts in our own ways. Alrighty. So let's write your first draft. Tips. I say write more than you need, because we're going to be cutting more than you think. I say minimum double the page count or word count. And let me tell you, and Elena knows this because we've done it together. My first draft, I cut half of it, and I had to add more. And then I cut it again and add more and cut it again. So, you're going to want more than what you need. And especially for your first draft, get all the ideas out there. You might want to talk about 3 different things in your essay. Make sure you complete those 3 ideas in that first draft. Sometimes you're going to scrap an idea and just take it out altogether. Sometimes you're going to need to add an idea, but just put it in writing somewhere in that first draft. And then the second is write to the conclusion. I am very guilty of this, but I write because I have the first couple paragraphs figured out. So I write to paragraph 4, and I'm like, okay, I'm tired. I'm not going to conclude this because I don't know how to conclude my essay. And then I leave it there, and I forget what I was doing, and I can't conclude it. So at least for your first draft, write the conclusion. Write what you want the conclusion to sound like, look like, and do that exercise. It's hard, but do it. And the last thing is really, for at least for your first draft, write it in one sitting. You want this to, I know getting an hour out of your time is really hard, but just sit and write it, focus and get it out, because you want all the ideas out there and you don't want to forget about anything. And don't leave and come back. Just do it. It's a better experience later on. So I do suggest doing it in one sitting. Cool. At this point, do we have any questions? We're good? Okay. Feel free to drop it in the chat too. So, alrighty. So you've written your first draft. Yay. Awesome. So what not to do next? We don't want to touch it for that day. Just don't touch it. Don't try to edit it right there. Let it marinate, and don't ask someone to read your first draft, because it's not going to be a good time for them, and it's not going to be a good time for yourself when they give you kind of, I don't know, maybe you're one of those people who can write a great essay in the first try, but I can't, and I can't handle first draft criticism, so don't have anyone read it. I think you're your worst critic sometimes, and you will continue to think about the essay throughout that day that you write it. Just don't ask someone else to read it. What to do? Let your thoughts settle. Writing is a really involved process, and especially on a personal statement, you're doing a lot of introspective thinking. So, other things might come up and other things might settle. So let your brain kind of rev and marinate in all the good thoughts. And then after a day, read your first draft. See if you like it. See if, it's what you envisioned writing. And then I would ask yourself these 3 questions. Where does your why come in your essay? A lot of times, our why comes too late in the essay. My first draft, my why for my life came in about the last 2 paragraphs of a 3-page essay. So that's way too late, right? Your admissions, you're reading a lot of essays. You don't want to get to the end to finally get to the why. You really want to see it early on. Maybe not the first sentence, but the first couple paragraphs, you really want to hone in on what the why is. So locate it and see how you can restructure your essay to bring that why up. And then is that why clear? And it should be clear to you, because you should know what you're looking for. And if it's not clear to you, then it's not going to be clear to anyone else. So make sure it's clear, it's understandable. And then when you look at your essay, your first draft, I would look at what's essential, what's not essential. Maybe you went off on a tangent talking about, I don't know, the time that you saw a lawyer win in court, right? You might be going into a tangent. Maybe there's some information in there that isn't essential to the purpose of your essay, and kind of mark where you can cut all of that. And then at the very end, after you read your first draft, I would write anything that you think you're missing, anything that you think you want to add, any other thoughts that you want to put in there. I would note that down in your first draft, save it. Do not overwrite your first draft. Save it as draft 1, copy and paste it into a new thing, or duplicate that and then start editing if you want to start editing there. Okay, I see a couple questions here. Writing the first draft, should we already think about putting it into paragraphs or use it like a diary? Personally, I'm a paragraph person. I'm also a big paragraph person. And in the editing process, I cut that down to very short, succinct paragraphs. So I think that's a writing style issue of how you want to present your story, and whether the diary style fits for your first draft or not. If I think because you're going to have to put it in paragraphs, maybe having a loose structure of paragraphs is good. or maybe even indicating while you write, this is where idea, like this is a separate idea. That would be a good way to kind of navigate your first draft if you're writing it in the diary format. Jack, is it okay to hint at your why earlier in your essay? Becomes more obvious throughout the personal statement. So I don't know what your writing style is, Jack. I have seen a couple people attempt it. 8 times out of 10, it doesn't end very well, because the hints are usually either too subtle or the reader gets frustrated and it's like, okay, get to the point. So if you have a great writing style, if you know you can hammer that style home, then I think that's a great way to do it. But I do think you have to also keep in mind that admissions is reading hundreds of these. And yes, it's exciting to kind of hint at stuff and then like, bam, like the conclusion. However, on your 100th essay that you're reading that day, are you really going to appreciate that? I don't know. Yeah, I think me too. Mine always comes in the second half for some reason. And Elena really helped me out in kind of pulling it forward and kind of cutting a lot of that first part and pulling it forward, even not hinting at it, but saying, like, outright saying it, to make it a little bit easier for the reader to understand. Because a lot of times we get, I see essays where they talk about a situation and then you see a little bit of like the why, and then they go into their differentiator, like their good qualities and great things about themselves, and then the why comes at the end. So it's like, okay, you've sandwiched these two things. I've forgotten the thing that you subtly mentioned in the front, and now we're here in the conclusion. It's like, okay, I finally see the why, but you've made me do all this work. So I would play with the structure. A exercise that I like to do is cut the essay in half and flip it to see if the front end and the back end, if you can flip that, and what does that do to structure your story, all of that. So fun things to do after you've gotten your first draft, but really your first draft is just getting the information out there. Yeah. So, and then, I mean, you're off to your next draft. So that's it for my presentation. If you have any issue, if you want to talk out like your topic, or you just want to learn a little bit more about this, feel free to reach out to me. Here, I'll put my email down. Feel free to reach out. Happy to talk always. And also, if you have a draft of your essay that you're working on, and you want to feedback from like a live feedback session with Steve, send those over to Steve because he is anxiously waiting for those. So we're all here to help. Happy to talk through anything. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah. Let's all get at least a first draft done, because that's the hardest part about these. And happy to answer any questions here. Oh, Ariel, you're going down the RC, the RC trap of personal statements. I think, okay, so one thing is it's really easy, especially when you're studying for the LSAT, to think about personal statements as an RC. But one thing to keep in mind is you don't need that logical component in your personal statement. Like, some people are like, oh, well, I don't really understand why you want to go to law school, or like, I don't see why this that you're saying, like you have an interest in law, how that is your why, right? Like, and people start to nitpick at it, and it's like, well, okay, you're sending in an application, so you want to go to law school. I got that feedback from a friend where I wrote like, I want to, be able to advise and be a better authoritative voice in cybersecurity law, right? And she was like, oh, I don't really understand why you're not going to public policy school. And it's like, it's not up to the reader to decide whether you should go to public policy or go to law school. You've already shown that intent. So the logic piece you don't need from RC, but great point, Ariel. Is there a specific header? I don't have an answer to that. Yeah, sorry, I can't answer that question. I would ask Steve. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here and listening to me talk for quite some time. Feel free to, reach out if you have any questions or if you just need to talk out a topic. Happy to help. Yeah, and everyone have a good night.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.